Okay, so hello everyone to this webinar. I'm Dr. Sheetal Chopra and I'm currently serving at Ericsson as their India lead for IPR advocacy. Warm welcome to this session. And as you may already know, we are going to discuss about a very important topic, standard essential patents and FRAND licensing. This is a new topic, I would say, for India. Not as new, but there have been a lot of judgments around this. There are judicial discourse that is now taking place, and it will be definitely useful for all of you to know the concept of standard essential patent and FRAND licensing, where FRAND means fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. It is one of the ways of licensing out the patents, especially those patents which cover technology that forms a part of a standard. But let me just, take you through to the next slides. 1 second. Okay, just a small disclaimer that this webinar of today is just for the academic purposes, for academic discussions, and all the views that are being expressed in today's presentation are my own views and has no affiliation with the company to which I am affiliated to. So that's a small disclaimer I just wanted to say. But if you want to really know companies' views on this particular topic of SEP and FRAND, there are multiple articles that have now been published. There are certain interim judgments which are now available, and feel free to let me know, and I'll be more than happy to, send you all the attachments. We have got a lot to cover today. I have been told that we have around 45 minutes to cover this topic. I'm not too sure if in this 45 minutes we'll be able to cover everything, but we'll try our level best. If in case this webinar, we are not able to cover all the topics which are listed here in the content session, we'll have another webinar, and that is where we can, discuss about rest of the things. So warm welcome again. I can see a lot of people now joining in. The contents that we intend to cover today are, what is standardization, its benefits. We'll also discuss about the standardization process, how the entire standardization actually takes place, what is the system around it that has been created by industry and by other stakeholders. We'll then progress on to discuss about standard essential patents and its FRAND licensing, how this is licensed out for a larger public sharing of that technology, so that there is a global adoption of that technology. We'll also have a look at some global updates because these are extremely important for us to know, considering that there is a complete jurisprudence that has evolved around this area. And for India also, it is extremely important to know the key learnings globally and maybe adopt some of those best practices. And then we'll end the slides by considering some of the challenges which are being faced by both the sides of the parties, whether it's a licensee or a licensor. So welcome you once again. Now that we are getting into the key contents of the slide, anybody who has any questions to ask, there is a class conversation slide bar. I hope you are all able to see. You can type your questions over there. I'll keep noting those questions, and maybe at the end of the presentation we'll discuss all of that. Okay, now let us look at what is a standard, because even before we want to understand about a standard essential patent or its FRAND licensing, I think we must appreciate what a standard at the outset means. I have got some slide notes just so that I don't forget some of the key things that I wanted to mention to all of you. 1 second, I'll just come back.
By the name of?
My webinar is going.
Okay, understand.
So I'm so sorry. There was somebody wanting the room, and we had just that challenge. Okay, so what is a standard? I think for a standard for a human being means a lot. For a humankind, it means a lot. And wherever we don't see standards being followed, we really get upset. And one of the very good examples to in a very laymanish term as to what a standard mean. I think wherever in the world you go and you ask for a paper from any retail shop, invariably the shopkeeper will give you A4 size sheet, and therefore it's a standard which is a de facto standard which is followed across the globe. So even when you go to Japan or any other developed world, you'll see that somebody who is taking an escalator, everyone will stand towards one side so that the other person who wants to run through that can take the another side of it. So those are typical standards which are de facto standards that people have adopted globally. Similarly, in the technology space, adoption of standard becomes very important. Especially, I think one of the best or the successful forms of adoption of standard that has ever been seen yet has been in the telecommunication space, where we have seen generations of the technology from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G, and now we are talking about 5G already, the standards which are being adopted. And as a result of this, any device that adopts this standard actually makes that device become interoperable with the other devices, and there is no issue with regard to the performance. So standard in a very general definition, it says that a standard refers to specifications that are accepted globally and the devices which are compliant with such specifications, and it helps thereby those devices become more interoperable and have enhanced performance. Let me take you a bit back into the history. Let's say back in the era of early 1980s. Um, it was only one person in 10 who had a phone connection, and even that phone connection wouldn't work. There were a lot of problems, and primarily because the phones were not having a standard adopted, and therefore if during that time, if any of you, at least I recollect that back in 2007 when I had to visit Japan, I had this small feature phone which just worked in India, and the moment I landed to that country, that phone just couldn't work, and vice versa. Anything that you pick up from any other country, you just cannot use it in your own country. And that was the reason, because all of these devices had their local standards or no standards. So every device had different technologies, so to speak, in a very very common language, and which resulted in these devices not interacting with each other. But over a period of time, 1990s and onwards, um, you know, different countries realized that it is very important that for a network society, for human race to get connected to each other, it's very important that the devices with which we connect should follow a common technology or the similar technology, so that there are no issues in terms of connectivity and other things that we are able to do today, as was not even foreseen maybe 3 decades ago. Um, so I think if you really look at in the telecommunication space, we now today, as a result, thanks to standardization, we in India alone there are close to more than 1.3 billion connections. And if someone would have said back in 1980 that back in sometime in 2020 we'll have these many connections, that person would have been put in a mental asylum for sure, because standardization was not part and parcel during that time. But today, anything that we are able to do with our cell phones, let's say you pick up a cell phone of any make, you pick up a phone from China, and you're able to make a phone call to a friend who is sitting in Kentucky, or you want to download a movie, the server of which is hosted in let's say America, or you want to make a Skype call with a friend who is sitting in Singapore, absolutely there is no problem, because again these devices are now following common standard. So it's like devices following up, talking to each other in the same language. Unlike to humans who will use different language to talk to each other. Someone will talk in Punjabi, someone will talk in Hindi, someone will be speaking in English, and it's a lot of trouble in then connecting to each other. You don't understand each other as to what a person is saying. but when it comes to devices, they all speak in a common language, which is in the form of a technology, and that common technology which is adopted is known as a standard. I hope I've been able to explain you what does standard mean. Any questions that any of you have, please keep typing on the taskbar. Okay, let me also tell you that the typical technological standards have a very low shelf life. Okay, let me also tell you, like I was previously explaining you in the previous slide, that there are broadly two types of standard. One is a de facto standard, and other is a technological standard or technical standards. De facto is something like Windows operating system. That any laptop that you buy, you'll have Windows operating system over there. Even the seat technology is a de facto standard, but the technical standards are completely different from the de facto standard, because these standards are adopted only after a lot of discussions amongst the industry people, amongst the innovators, and only the best of the technology is then chosen on the basis of merit and consensus. So this slide actually shows that the standards have a very low shelf life, in the sense that today one technology that you get, after a few years, that technology becomes obsolete, or it becomes not as much in use as against the new features. And therefore, if you look at in 2G phones, the best that you could do is send text messages, that too in a very few bits, or make a phone call. But over a period of time, traversing from 2G to 3G to 4G and now to 5G, there are new features that continue to get added onto the devices. For example, now you could make a Skype call. You could also download a movie. You can actually do WhatsApping. You can do Viber. You can do so many things over a phone. New features have been added in terms of speed also. The speed that was offered in 2G is completely different from a speed that you are able to see in 4G phones. Just to give you an example so that you are able to relate to this easily, a movie which is a 90-minute movie, you are able to download that. It takes around 72 hours when it is over 2G, as against it takes only 90 seconds when it is over a 4G. And now when you are talking about 5G, where it has become a reality in many parts of the world, there is almost a virtual connection that you are able to see with almost zero latency. So this is just to explain you how over generations there are new features that continues to get added onto the devices, and that makes devices become even more better in terms of their efficiency and in terms of their interoperability. So if you look at this slide, it shows that 2G actually entered in 1992. It almost took a decade. So in 2002 is when we got 3G, and for 4G it took almost 8 years. And now when we have already started to talk about 5G, less than 5 years. So technology is entering into the market pretty fast. Probably the reason is because there is a huge industry investment. There is a continued industry investment. There is a technological evolution, development that is happening quite quickly, and hence we are able to see that technology entering into the market very fast, as against the FC. And I think in general, not telecommunication, but generally wherever technology is getting advanced, it offers a need for very quick and timely patent grants. If the value the value continues to be the same, but if the space or the time at which technology is entering into the market is so quick, and hence it is actually shrinking the time period for people to be able to commercialize their intellectual property and to be able to gain return on investment or have return on investment in a timely fashion. And therefore the timely grant of patent is extremely important when it comes to ICT as a sector as a whole. Because if you are sitting in a negotiation table and you want to license out your technology, and there is a prospective who may be interested in getting your technology and adopting it into the devices that the person is manufacturing. It's extremely important for both the sides to know what are the claims that are granted, because it is on the basis of the granted claims that you are able to then license it out and license in the technology. So it is important for both the stakeholders to have granted patent on a table when the licensing takes place. And I think it becomes all the more important when you look at some unwilling licensees who then use it as a strategy to delay the licensing, saying that, oh, your patent is not granted first, get your application, get into a grant stage, and then you come and take, talk to me about a license. And that increases the whole licensing ecosystem, and hence the need for a timely grant. um, okay, let's progress to the next slide. So this slide actually gives a bit of information about the value that standards have brought to the table. And also, let me just tell you that standardization itself is not an easy thing. There are innovators, companies, countries who compete with each other in order to have their technology get adopted as a part of a standard. And getting that technology adopted itself is a long cycle, because it is not only on the basis of consensus but also on the basis of the merit that the best technology gets chosen. Just to again give you an example, for 4G there are standards which were getting developed simultaneously. One was WiMAX, another was LT. So if you look at your phones, usually you will see on the top menu bar, you'll see, like, my phone is showing 4G LTE on the top. It shows 4G LTE, so which shows that the standard which has been adopted in this phone is an LTE standard, as against the WiMAX standard, which was also developed. So both WiMAX and LTE competed with each other, and finally, basis the merit, market decided to adopt LTE as a standard. Let me now, through this slide, give you some of the benefits that people have been able to witness as a result of standardization. So it shows that there are 7.5 billion mobile subscriptions globally, out of which billion are unique subscribers. And the difference between the numbers you see is because one person may have two SIMs, and therefore the difference between 7.5 billion as a subscription base and 5 billion as a unique subscriber. India accounting for 21% of global subscribers. Some connectivity issue, but I hope you're able to now see the slides. So what I was saying to you is that standardization has also enabled development of over 2.2 million uh, mobile applications. So just to again, make you realize the benefits of standardization, that there are both direct and indirect effects, network effects. As a result of standardization, this has also given rise to completely new set of industries. For example, mobile applications, which could not be even forcing, maybe three decades ago or 2 decades ago, is now there. It's an industry which is up and thriving and is actually creating a lot of revenue streams. Um, And then there is a whole sort of e-commerce, platform that is now available for public at large. In education space, in healthcare, there are new things that you now see, because devices are now able to speak to each other in a common language, and hence there is a huge public demand, which also gives rise to economies of scale for different countries. I think there is another very interesting data. If you look at the last bullet of this slide, it says that it is expected that close to 160 zettabyte of data will be generated by 2025. It's mind-boggling because so many devices are getting connected to each other. There is so much of data that is getting exchanged. This is the kind of range that we are expecting by 2025. E-commerce revenue has, it has generated $1.2 million every 30 seconds. So it's a very impressive data, and you can yourself see how much is the value of standardization for a human race. And this has been possible because thankfully different countries in a globe, they understood the value of standardization, and hence the countries decided not to follow their own local standards but actually come up with the standards that everyone is following. So there is a convergence towards following a let us just get to the next slide. Anyone who needs some of the the sources to these data, please feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to share. This is extremely important again when we look at, as a result of standardization, what has come back to the society. It is close to 3.3 trillion US dollar that has come back to the society, and this is the data for 6 countries, which was done by Boston Consulting Group, BCG, and they in India, China, Brazil included in those 6 countries. And it shows that different people in a value chain has been beneficiary of this 3.3 trillion US dollar turnover. And who all are the beneficiaries? It includes chipset makers, it includes telecom service providers, it also includes device manufacturers, it includes developers, and also the people who actually made this 3.3 trillion dollar come back to the society. The patent owners who actually created the standards, who actually created the technology that could become part of the standard. And it is extremely important to know that out of this 3.3 trillion US dollar, what has flown back to the patent owners has been close to only 0.35%. So it's important to see that the benefits of standardization are immense, as against people who might think that standardization is an easy task or it might not be required, or some countries who may wish to come up with their local standards. I think this is an important piece for them to know that it's a huge economies of scale and turnover that one can envisage. 4 trillion US dollar is a data point that the same report has suggested that will be invested further by the technology providers in the R&D by the end of 2020. So a lot is at stake. I think a lot of R&D investments are being made, and hence the need for return of investment in a timely manner. So this is another interesting slide, and thereafter I think we can then push to the second part of this today's presentation. Okay. I hope I am being quite articulate. If you have any problem, please stop me and just type on the type bar if there is anything that you want me to focus a bit more in so far whatever slides we've been able to cover. So just please feel free. Let's not make it a monologue. Let's try to make it as a dialogue. Okay. So this is, thanks Garima for just assuring that everything is going well. And so this presentation on this slide, it shows, again, some of the benefits in the form of economy and the GDP. So it says that, digital economy report, it says that for every 1,000 broadband connections, there are 80 jobs that gets created. Today, as we know that in India, there are more than 1 billion subscription base. And by end of 2020, we are envisaging close to 2 billion, subscription rate or the subscription base, which is expected to result in 100% population penetration. And this will lead to, creation of more than 48 million jobs by the end of this 2020. So I think what is more important for us to understand or take away as from this slide is that standardization is not only helping in achieving economies of scale, but also in creating a lot of employment. So therefore, need for a global standardization. Also, there is another report from British Standards, and it says that the standards could contribute close to 0.3 to 0.9%. Also, there is another study, as you can see from here, which shows that 1% increase in broadband connectivity, it increases new business registration close to 3.8%. I think this is extremely important again to know that it's not only economies of scale, it's not only the employment generation, but also generation of new industries, as I just said, e-commerce or mobile applications that you are able to see, or in the form of health sector or education sector. There are so many new sectors that you are able to see today because of global standardization, as a result of which we are able to achieve all of that. I think, if you look at the last part of this bullet of this slide, it says that the it's close to 21% of the revenues that are invested in R&D by the ICT sector. Thus far, we have always thought that it is pharma technology, pharma, biotechnology, nanotechnology that have been the sectors that invest highest in the form of R&D investment. But it is also ICT sector which is investing close to 21% of their revenue in the R&D. Okay, with this, we have covered first part of our presentation, and we have now entered into the second part of it, which is the standardization process. And it is very important again for us to understand how standardization takes place, how much complex is the process. So if you really look at, there are standard development organizations. These are all, mostly, in fact, these are all not for profit industry organizations. They develop and agree on the technical standards. So it's a lot of companies and countries that come together and identify the set of specifications that needs to be adopted. Most of the technical standards are voluntary standards, and there are legal standards that can also be developed under a mandate. There are several SDOs. These are all region-specific SDOs. For example, in our own country, we have TSDSI. I'm sorry, that logo isn't pasted here. So that is Telecom Standard Development Institute of India. That's India-specific standard development organization where standardization activities take place. Similarly, for Europe, we have ETSI, which is there for the European side, and the European companies sit over there and they talk to each other, they identify the problem that needs to be addressed, and thereafter, subsequent process takes place. IEEE is another SDO from US, also ATIS. Similarly, there is one from China and one from Japan. So there are different countries that have got their own, SDOs, and all these SDOs then become part of 3GPP, which is third generation partnership project. And this is where all SDOs will come together, mention what their standards are. They adopt the 3GPP standards so that, there is a global compatibility of the devices. So there are, if here you look at, some important SDOs, including TSDSI, that should have been mentioned in this slide. And TSDSI was initiated in India back in 2013. There is a very robust IPR policy that TSDSI has, And on 29th January, very recently, they have revised their IPF policy, which is much more balanced and much more aligned to other SDOs policies. So, this presentation or this slide lists the kind of um, technologies that are developed in different SDOs. For example, in IEEE, it's more Wi-Fi. In HC, it's more telecom related technologies. And in 3GPP, it's CDMA. So there are different technology, you'll find in different SDOs getting developed, and then globally countries then give acceptance to these global standards and then mandate their device manufacturers to adopt those technologies. I think on as a part of this slide, let me also mention that uh, who are the members of this SDOs? Who all are the stakeholders? And these are quite varied in numbers. It has standard essential patent owners. It also has the device manufacturers. It has startups, SMEs. Um, you'll also see that the government also becomes part of the standards body. Um, there are also other stakeholders such as the implementers who are the strict users of the technologies. So one side is the technology providers, the other is the technology implementers, the startups, and a lot of stakeholders, who will give problems, who will suggest some problem areas that needs to be resolved. Then the technology providers go back to their R&D, come up with the best of technology, and bring it on the table. Uh, if you look at who is actually contributing to the technology, they are very few in numbers. And these are only handful of the companies that are actually contributing to the SDOs in the form of technology. These may be, 20% of the companies, while rest 80% are technology implementers. And it's a very symbiotic relationship that is there between the technology providers and the technology implementers, because they both interact with each other to see what the problem is and what is the best solution that needs to be proposed. And hence 100% of the work in form of creating technology is done by 20% of these companies, and rest 80% are the technology implementers. So all of these are very important part of the entire value chain, who then work together to come up with the best of the technologies. There is another very interesting report by Justice Barron, who basically gives shows one example in the form of empirical data also, which is the work done by 3GPP. And it shows that out of 266 companies which participated, most of them didn't really make any significant contributions in the form of technology, but it was only 9 to 10 companies who actually did make contributions, close to 10,000 over a period of 2 decades. So this is just again to re-emphasize that the number of technology providers are very few that are actually contributing very effectively to the whole standardization ecosystem, and thus return on investment becomes very important. And not all of them are active licensees, licensors. It's very few who are actively licensing out there, asserting their patents to be able to receive return on investment. Okay, we now next move on to the standardization process. Uh, the next slide within the standardization process that we initiated our discussions on. So it shows a lot of high investments and it is high risk. So if you look at this graph, it shows that over a period of time, number of companies that are contributing to who are becoming part of SDOs, which is Standard Development Organization, has increased to 400 plus. There are close to 40 plus countries, and thus far, around 38.5 years or 462 months or 3 million man working hours that have been invested so far in being part of these meetings. So it's a huge one. You see how many people, how many countries, how many companies are involved in this standardization process. In fact, this slide shows that it's almost like a funnel. You keep adding technologies, as many as you develop in your R&D, but finally it's very few set of technologies that are able to become part of a standard. As I said, it goes through consensus, it goes through merit. It's only the best technology that is chosen. So which also shows that at the start of the R&D, you don't even know that whether your technology that you are developing will ever become part of a standard or not, or it may just fail. It's almost like sitting in a forest and you see there are multiple trees, out of which 80% may be falling without making any noise. So there are so many technologies which don't even become part of a standard. So every investment that has gone into developing those standard those technology, it's highly risky, so to speak, and hence it becomes very important for a patentee who is able to get some of the technology become part of a standard to then license it out to the wider audience, so that there is wider adoption of a standard, so that there is economies of scale, hence which provides him an effective remedy to be able to then gain return on investment. So the funnel is very narrow from the bottom of it. It's only six, as the data shows, out of the total submitted contributions for 3G and 4G, it was only 16.7% that were actually adopted as a part of a standard. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, there were close to more than 3 million man working hours which were spent in meetings alone. Which means when you go and sit in this SDOs, you have to sit there, you have to talk to each other, you have to tell what your company is doing, you have to bring your technological contributions, you have to interact with so many people over there. So in meetings alone, this is the kind of investment in terms of man working hours that has been spent. And each meeting goes close to more than 8 to 9 hours per day. So this figure does not include the amount of time that is actually invested in R&D by the inventors. All that is separate. So hence this figure actually shows you the complexity and the kind of human effort that is required in coming up with the best of the technology that all of us as consumers are able to enjoy. So, standardization is just like a contractual in the whole standardization process. If you look at, there is a contractual commitment that you also make to the SDOs, to which there are third-party beneficiaries. So, for example, if I'm a company, I have come up with some technological contribution, and I am part of, let's say, Etsy. I'm a European company, and one of my technology becomes part of a standard. Then I have to give voluntary commitment to say that I will be happy to make my technology available to to the larger audience, uh, so that the technology is shared and is widely adopted. Making the technology available does not mean licensing it to every person in a value chain. It is only at one particular level in a value chain because you can only bite an apple once, take a royalty once in a value chain, and hence as a owner of the patent, you decide at what level in a value chain would be best for both licensee and the licensor, and for the competition to remain in the market, would be best to license out the technology. So it's a voluntary commitment. So unlike any other patent, which has a technology to which competing technologies are available in the market, this is the patent which actually claims the technology that is being adopted by everyone who is manufacturing standardized devices, uh, and therefore this patent is now considered essential patent. So from now we enter into the concept of standard essential patent. So this is the patent which actually covers the technology that has become a part of a standard, and this patented technology is then invariably implemented by every device manufacturer who wishes to manufacture standardized devices so that his device is able to interact with other devices in the globe. And as a standard essential patent owner, and which we in an abbreviation also say as SEP, this SEP owner makes a voluntary commitment to its own SDO that I'll make my patent available on fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms and conditions. So it's a contractual commitment. If you do not, comply with this contractual commitment, you can be sued in the court of law for its violation or for its breach. And who all are the beneficiary to my commitment to this SDO? Are all implementers, all device manufacturers, who wants to adopt that technology. They can then say that, you have to make your patented technology available on the day one. So unlike any other patent, a conventional patent, I think there is no opportunity for an SEP owner to abuse the dominant position, if at all there is a dominant position, because he or she has already made voluntary commitment to the SDO that he's ready to make his technology available on fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms and conditions, which means that you can't even dictate the market price. It is the market that will decide, you know, at what price would the technology be available. So it's together, the SEP owner along with the market will together come and decide what is the value of that patented technology when the licensing negotiations takes place. Okay, so let us also look at what FRAND means, which is fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. I think we'll just go through a couple of slides now because it's already 11:41, and I'm mindful that we have to close our presentation by 11:45, and thereafter we will leave it open for 15 minutes for all of you to ask questions. And rest of the slides, which is the global updates and the challenges which are being faced, we'll try to cover in the next or the subsequent webinar whenever it is scheduled. So, okay, what is FRAND, or fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory? So FRAND is not a magic number. You see, it's not a cloth which is stitched by a tailor which fits everyone. It's no one size fit all. This is very unique, and it is mostly dependent on different licensing. Whenever a licensee and a licensor is sitting together, every licensing is unique in its own sense, which will then decide what would be the royalty rate and how much one would be paying to the other. And therefore, there is no one magic number that you can actually assign. That okay, this is the portfolio of a patents that a person is interested in licensing out, and this is the amount that one will pay or everyone will pay. It never happens like that because every licensee is unique in its own sense. There might be some licensee who may have some patents to share, something to cross license. There might be some licensees who have nothing to share, but there are some who wants to pay up a large lump sum amount as upfront, or some might be interested in having declining royalty rate. Some might have a completely different business model, and hence, what would be the particular royalty rate, or what will be fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory, will be decided when there is actual negotiation that takes place. Um, FRAND is almost like a right balance. FRAND value is never too high, which makes business of licensee completely unsustainable, and it cannot be too low, which makes the business of licensor completely unsustainable. Okay, so let me just try to give you a very layman idea of, example to get an idea of what FRAND could mean and how the royalty amount is decided. Let's say I've written a book, and that book is being sold at an MRP of, let's say, 600 rupees. Um, and one of you is, let's say, a university dean. And as a dean, you come to me and you say that, okay, I'm interested in your book and I want to buy, let's say, 200 copies of it for my students. And there is another person who is who is, uh, let's say, a student, and he wants to come to me and he says that I want to buy a book, and I just need a single copy. There is another institution who wants to buy, let's say, 500 set of those books. Now, even if the MRP of a book is 600, I will not end up, asking 600 from each one of you, because each of these three people or three different buyers of the book are placed differently. For those who are trying to get volumes of the book, might be given some discount, or there might be someone who wants to pay some amount in the upfront and maybe pay rest of the amount in installment. So all I'm just trying to say that the frand being a magic number might continue to change. The terms and conditions as a whole might remain to be the same, but the royalty amount might just change depending upon who the licensee is, and what is the kind of business model he or she has, what is his level of interest in the form of different portfolio of a patent which is available for a license. So all those things play a wide role. In fact, one of the key things that plays a very important role in FRAN licensing is the conduct of the parties. If there is a unwilling licensee who is just trying to delay the entire process of negotiation, the royalty rate might go to a little higher side, as against someone who is acting in a good faith, who is acting in a very nice manner, who is a willing licensee. Certainly there will be leverage given to him in a different way. So FRAND is like a floor and a cap. A floor, which is a minimum, and a cap, which is a maximum. And it also helps in ensuring that the SEP owner does not ask for beyond what his patented portfolio is bringing a value on the table. So, for example, if there is, let's say, a mobile phone manufacturer or any device manufacturer who has put, let's say, diamonds or studded diamonds or made it very nice in the form of packaging, an SAP owner would not ask for a share of that extra thing that a device manufacturer has done, and therefore there is a cap. You will never go and ask beyond that particular cap. Similarly, there is a floor that if sometime it might happen, and we've seen it in India, that someone might just wants to sell their device for free to people to get that consumer base, and is able to have its cross subsidy with some other business. But that doesn't mean that he will not pay anything to SEP owner for the sake that he's selling everything for free. And therefore, floor will decide that you are ready, you are eligible to get that fair share of your technology. So FRAND is a very interesting concept. I think we should end here, because this is something which will require you to digest a bit more, to read a bit more on this topic. And next webinar, when we come together, please ask me any questions that you may have with regard to this topic of FRAN licensing and licensing of SCPs. But now I am just leaving the floor open for the comments, for any inputs that you might wish to ask for. And the taskbar is already available for you to type. So in the next topic, we will discuss about some of the global updates, as I mentioned, and also some of the examples, and which will, I think, will take around 45 minutes extra to cover all of those topics. I hope you like this presentation, and you enjoyed it. Do read more. I cannot see any questions yet, either, which means that it was very easy for all of you to understand that there are no questions, or maybe it might just mean that you want to take a bit more of time to then come back and ask questions in the next session. Okay, let's wait for another few seconds for any questions that you might have, and after that we'll end the session. Okay, so I think let's then say bye to all of to each other, and we hope to see you again. Next time, we'll work with the organizers to see if there is another session that could be organized, and we'll discuss this more in detail. Bye bye.